wasn't actually going to wear the hat, but then people started tweeting that they couldn't recognize me. So I thought, okay, got to work that personal brand, so I'll keep the hat. I'm Jim Ducharme. I'm the community manager from GetResponse. And if you're wondering what this is my Della control device. I've come prepared. And it's got a laser sight, so I don't actually have to shoot him. I just have to point it at him and get his attention. So what I'd like to do, first of all, is have everybody just introduce themselves one at a time before we get into the questions and discussions. So I'll start with Bob.
I'm Bob Frady. I'm the Senior Director of Global Outbound Marketing for Expedia. I run our email program across the globe.
Hi, I'm Karen Talavera, President of Synchronicity Marketing. I'm an email marketing consultant, coach, and trainer in the industry.
Hey, I'm Jose Fabron. I'm the Managing Director of Axiom's Agency Services. I run our New York and Nashville offices, and what we do is creative, campaign management, analytics, and strategy around email and multi-channel marketing.
I'm Delaquist, CEO of Alchemy Works. We're a digital agency that does pretty much all of that, based in London and Atlanta, and one of our clients made it for one of the best email programs on Morgan's presentation. Thank you, Morgan.
And speaking of Morgan, thank you very much for having us here, and especially for me, this is my first time at MPIS, and it's quite an honor to be up here moderating one of the panels, so thank you so much for having me. You know, I come from, I don't know if anyone else does, but I come from a radio background, spent about 15 years as a radio jock, and I used to always get into arguments. It's changed now, but back in the time when I was in radio, we had this rating system, which I never really believed in. We had this situation where I basically viewed the radio rating system as kind of like reading the entrails of a sheep. And so the way we would account, you know, we would give one person the influence of, say, anywhere from 5 to 10,000 people on the ratings diary system. So I never really had a great faith in the rating system. And I kind of wonder, I want to start with Della about this. Is email held to a higher standard simply because it can be, because it has the capability, the measurability? Is that why there's so much expectation where email is concerned, as far as attribution and accountability is concerned?
I wasn't expecting to come up first. Yeah, I think that email has a metric that no one else has, which is opens and clicks. And so we tend to dive into that and look at that, and it's driven almost all thinking in terms of attribution ever since email came about. And I actually think that's a problem, because no other channel is held to be quite as responsible for the direct outcome of what they do. I mean, can you imagine, I mean, TV would disappear if you had to prove every sale from a TV commercial, or radio would disappear if you had to do the same thing. And whilst they are valuable, and whilst it's lovely to have that direct attribution, I think what it causes us to do is fail to realize that that attribution is probably, my best guesstimate, only about 35% of actually what goes on. Most of the other stuff is hidden in the same way as radio and TV, et cetera, and I think what we need to do as an industry is find a way of tapping into that. And even if it is reading sheep's entrails, or doing regular surveys and attributing the voice of one person to 1 million or 500,000 or 10 or whatever the number is, I think we would all be better off, because we would get more money and budget to do what we want to do, and that's why attribution is so important to me.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think that in a traditional company that's multi-line, where you have traditional media that's competing, that's probably true. I think that in more of a .com or e-commerce focused business, we compete against search all the time, and search is held to just as an accountable standard as email is. The difference is that we're viewed as a free or low-cost channel, and so when our channel starts to go one way or the other, people get very concerned, because they're like, well, my low-cost channel is suffering, and now I have to pay more through search because it's significantly more expensive than email to bring in traffic. So then you get into finance discussions about deleveraging your channel, because you're paying more for similar amounts of traffic because the paid channels are overtaking the free channels.
Right. But you know, we actually on search, what we see is when we overlay search and email demand, if you take time-lapsed kind of snapshots of big email campaigns, you see it driving search. Because we're often in the situation where we have to defend marketing budgets on behalf of our clients. And so what we'll do is we'll take a look at everything, and we'll sit there and say, okay, look, you know, we're driving email's doing this, and this is what you find in Omniture or Google Analytics, and that's fine. When you overlay search on top of that, you start to see the humps occur around big email campaigns.
Yeah, we have arguments all the time internally, and I make the other channels buy me lunch because I'm giving them so much free traffic.
And just remember, you know, search doesn't drive demand. I mean, well.
You get a halo effect, basically, going on with the combination.
You know, the whole reason for being on this panel is I don't really know what the right answer is, and the first company that comes with an answer that's comprehensive, that says, here's all of your digital channels, here's how they work together, and here's how one feeds the other in these proportions, would be something I'd be very interested in talking to someone about. So if you have an answer, meet me outside afterwards. And
Can I just quickly add to Bob's comment? My view is that if someone whose email address you have, who's on your program, comes via search, that's not the success of search, it's a failure of your email program. You're underinvesting.
Anybody from Omniture in the house?
I'd like to address your original question, Jim. You know, should email be held accountable? I say yes, and so should every direct response channel, because it can. The challenge today is, you know, we don't have one dominant direct response channel anymore. Or maybe it's becoming email. In the days when, you know, you had your catalog and your retail shop, if you even had both, it was pretty easy to tell where sales were coming from. Now, all of these multiple direct response, separate from branding and mass media, are overlapping one another, and again, having a cumulative effect, just like multiple digital channels that can be individually held accountable or overlapping. So for a lot of people, yeah, it's a mess.
Sorry, go.
Well, I think part of the problem with that, and it's not a bad idea, is what is email? Is it an efficiency channel, or is it a brand play? And how do you actively measure the brand impact of what you're doing? And there really isn't good attribution for that. You know, because I think that, you know, the more I do sort of direct marketing, the more I love brand marketing, because the brand impact of what we do, how do you take advantage of that, and how do you measure that?
You know, but you know, it's interesting. You know, what we do see though is when we take a look at, you know, attribution across all channels, right? So that's based on a foundation of data, and you can actually recognize people. Fine, I'm Axiom, you know, whatever. But the point is, you know,
You can be biased. It's okay.
well, I mean, it's interesting because we get to see stuff, and people move across, you know, channels and things like that, and be able to say, wait a minute, these sort of things actually do contribute across the board. And we can see an individual. And when you think about an individual, email marketers tend to think about email addresses. Well, there's a many-to-many relationship between accounts and emails and people and all that sort of stuff, so it gets a little bit more complicated. But when you go back to an email channel, what you can see, if you look at the customer lifetime value of individuals, over time you will see the effect of email, things like welcome streams, et cetera, on their long-term value. So for example, for one customer that was an online subscription business, we screwed up. People don't always say it, but we screwed up. We screwed up their welcome stream. It was very complex, had like 99 versions to it for a couple weeks. Anyway, we said, we got to go look at this. And so we looked at it, and the people that did not get the welcome stream were 65% less valuable over that year. And so we said, this stuff has an impact on what's going on. So you can start to really look at those sorts of things and find the nuggets around where all this stuff does influence the customer lifetime value. It's not always about the channel, but how they work together.
So let's say you've got an integrated marketing campaign. You've got your subscribers are getting the catalog as well. As an email marketer within a company, how do you make it clear that where those sales are coming from? What's driving it? How are you going to make that case that email is playing a significant role in driving those sales as compared to the other channels that you're also using as well? How do you highlight the value?
I think that the hard part, and maybe other organizations have solved for this, is we're really at the dependence of a good Omniture implementation or Core Metrics or Google Analytics or whatever you use. And so you have to be in the pocket of the people who are setting that up to make sure that your traffic is tracked efficiently. And it sounds boring, you know, it's not as exciting as new creative, but the devil's in the details with our channel, so you have to make sure that you're picking up, that your traffic is being appropriately handled. Because when there's other groups that they're paying a lot of money for on a per transaction basis, they'll get the attention. So you'll optimize for search traffic, and then email traffic. It's like, well, if your string is longer than 1,024 bytes because of the way that Omniture was implemented, the string breaks. You know, then what happens? Well, your channel goes down and you have to go in and fix it. So you have to be down in the weeds with the Omniture or measurement people to make sure that your traffic's being handled properly. The second thing that you have to do is you have to live with those measurements, but then you have to also create ecosystem measurements, like what's the overall health of your database. So our database purchases $500 million a year in travel. My channel gets credit for about 60 million of that. So that's a pretty big gap. So is it just that an accident that we're only getting credit for a portion of it, or just the nature of the beast, or because we're just measuring it the wrong way? And part of it is we just measure it the wrong way. We don't look at the ecosystem enough. We only look at the details. So you have to look at both.
Karen?
I totally agree with what you said, and I'm thinking about the situations where email is not directly driving commerce. So it's adding value, it's doing, lead nurturing, content support. B2B would be a good example where people are making group decisions and nobody's ever going to buy off a single email. So then what do you do is the question. And for a lot of companies, it's looking at that long tail view, like you're saying, looking at the lifetime value. In a lot of the presentations I've seen Della do in the last couple of years, his company's pulled a lot of data that shows this kind of thing. You take a snapshot at a point in time and say, hey, when we weren't doing email or we were doing less email, this is what the LTV was of our customer base. Now let's look at it. Or you suppress a certain percentage of the database from getting email. Worst case scenario, you've got poor tracking or no tracking, and do a A/B split test to see if you're getting lift or depression.
For the brand marketers out there, how many people use a holdout sample where you don't send any email?
We're seeing like 2 hands maybe.
Yeah, we have a holdout sample of 2% that get no email. And I'd love to send them stuff because that's 2 free %.
Does that shift? Is it the same 2% over a long period of time, or?
Well, people come in and go out depending
okay.
upon whether or not they're still engaged with the brand. But it's critical that you have a holdout sample to judge the effectiveness.
I think it starts with really wanting to. I think because we only do email, believe you me, I care. Multi-channel marketers go, oh, it's a multi-channel world and I'm getting the money anyway, so whether it's email or this or that doesn't really matter. Hey, Bob, you should be happy with 60 million, okay? We've got 500 million, your bid is 60, so what, right? We're all happy. I just don't agree with that, right? You've got to be obsessive. You've got to, I kind of kid and say, another word for silo is expert. It's expertise. You've got to focus on getting your share and your rightful share. Holdout group is one of the best ways of doing it. And again, I sort of jokingly say, you want to know how important email is? How about making your whole database a holdout group for a week? See how long you can last without it. And the answer will be no time at all. You'd change in a day. So going back to the point about how do we attribute, I know the panel, and we're going to go into direct response type attribution, but we're missing, in my opinion, a very huge trick, right? How does media do the attribution, right? They do it. They manage to attribute to TV. And the way they do that is to do things like pre and post holdout groups. And one of the advantages email has over every other channel is it's the only one where you can guarantee no leakage. If someone didn't get an email, they did not get an email, right? You can't prove that someone watched a TV ad, or you can't prove that you could hold out properly in TV or press or anything else. So typically what they'll do is pre and post surveys, right? So before they send out their campaign on a particular program, they'll do spontaneous recall for certain values, or, and then afterwards they'll ask the same question and they'll attribute that in that way. And I think we should start using, I come from a media background, right? And I think we're leaving something on the table when we don't use media techniques to see the impact of email on our overall program.
And Bob, to your point, I mean, that's also how you measure the brand impact and all of the residual or additional, aside from your primary objective for sending email, if it's, drive sales or qualify leads or get people to look at content, there's all these other benefits going on that we're not necessarily tracking and we should be accounting for.
I'm constantly preaching that.
I think part of the problem is us.
Part of the problem?
Speak for yourself.
And that, we're really thrilled with nuanced measurements like, open and click to send rate and all that nonsense. And we lose the big picture and we focus too much on the small things. And I don't know about your organizations, but search marketers are like freaking tigers. They'll just tear you a new one whenever they get a chance to.
Yeah.
And then you have sort of the very nice, farmer emailers over here like, oh, don't bother us, we're sending email. And email marketers get run over in the attribution war because the search marketers are so friggin' aggressive. And forget about partner marketing; they're the worst of all. We as email marketers need to be more confident in the fact that our channel actually works. Somebody tweeted earlier that like 9 times somebody's mentioned that email's dead. Like screw that, email's not dead. We wouldn't be here if it were. And we have to strike that from our own thinking and be more aggressive about what value we're bringing to the table.
That's 10. 10 times we mentioned it now.
10.
If you take Morgan's slide before, it said something like 70% of U.S. adults may, use email and 55% purchase online. So there's a gap, right? So one of the things that email marketers aren't terribly good at is offline attribution. And so we have a concept that we promote to people in one channel and they transact in that same channel. That's not right. That's not right. We see it with tactics and things like that are generally not considered the best. Things like list rental and things like that. And if you promote to them via email, they tend not to transact via email. But if you look at the measurement across all your channels, all your stores, and all that sort of stuff, you tend to find that these things work a lot better than people think they do.
This drives me nuts. This drives me crazy. It's the cadence people that kill me in this stuff, where it's like, oh, they're not interacting, so you should shut them down or turn them off or retire the email address.
And that's not true.
Don't even get me started on that stuff because
Please get them started on it.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous suicide that email marketers undergo when they go, well, we're just going to slow down the cadence on people because they're not doing what we expect them to do. That is complete and total baloney.
You're going to get fingers from both sides now. So, right. If I was a politician, I'd be doing that. Basically, no, absolutely. One of the things, whether you like it or not, more people will not open every email you send them will open, with the exception of a transactional email, and that's, that's not email marketing per se. That's responding to something someone has actually done. And I have 2 or 3 examples of where you can actually prove it and how you can leverage that fact. So one of the ones is that the Guardian newspaper in the UK had a sport magazine that came out once a month, right? So because it was infrequent and outside the every Sunday kind of thing, a lot of people signed up to a program to say, tell me when it's coming out. And the funny thing was, their open rate was about 2%. It was negligible, and they were really, really concerned about that. They did everything to make people open. They wouldn't open it. And so they quit the program, and sales that month plummeted because you don't need to open an email that just says, hey, it's coming out this Sunday. And if things you should try using your subject line, if you're a retailer and you have a physical presence as well, not just an online presence, if you just send out an email on a Friday where the subject line is great deals in store this weekend, right? I don't have to open that, and I'm walking through the mall and I go, oh, Gap, they've got a great deal on this weekend, and you walk in. And that's the kind of attribution thing. And to sort of pull back and say, well, these guys are unresponsive, and that's a whole different, we could fight for a year on that one, on the inactives, and in fact, I'm so battle-scarred, I don't even feel it anymore. But the bottom line is that inactive people, there is a big gap, and they are transacting with you in other ways, and that's why the search guys are so aggressive, because they know that when you send your email out to the entire list, they know they get a huge spike in search, and so do the affiliates and everyone else. And the reason they're so aggressive is because guess who's going to lose if we prove the point? And sitting there like wusses and letting them do that is one of our biggest challenges. Bob's right. We're our own worst enemy.
They're a step ahead. And
Yeah.
and you bring up a good point, and not to segue into the whole thing of inactives, but inactive in what? And you said it as well, Jose. People that they get an email, they're not necessarily going to respond in that particular channel or do exactly what you want back through the email or even through online. You know, but that doesn't mean they're not going to respond, so you've got to have that holistic.
I completely blame the ESPs for this. I do. It's because that's all right. That's
Missed
all right.
again.
The ESPs have given you the gun to shoot yourself in the head with through cadence management. It's ridiculous. You know, if you think that you're paying too much to send to inactives, then get a better deal from your ESP, or get a new SP, or bring it in house. It's as simple as that.
I'm talking the gun.
It's a binary world. You're in or you're out. If you're in, you're in. If you opt out, then you're out. It's as simple as that. There's none of this shades of gray baloney, because you never know. You never know when people are going to do things. And your job as an email marketer is to be there when they're thinking of it, not when you think they should be thinking of it.
Yeah, sure. Let's get him a mic before he shoots somebody
I'm ready.
else.
I got Della here with me.
Check. Okay, so here's the question.
Yes.
You're saying that if they're inactive, keep sending to them, correct?
If they're what?
If they're inactive, if they're not opening or clicking an email, keep sending to them.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you balance that statement with the fact that reclaim rates have shortened by the ISPs? So Hotmail, AOL, Yahoo, Gmail, reclaiming inactive accounts at an alarming rate to create spam traps to find out who's doing it wrong. Now, if you keep sending to them, post 6 months, or actually it's 180 days, you exponentially risk hitting a spam trap. So how do you balance your statement with the fact that ISPs are reclaiming accounts?
You know, that's just bad IP management.
It's not bad IP management. That is a fact of life. That's a fact of life.
Not. If you're mailing your file every single week, then you'll find out the soft bounces, you'll find out the hard bounces, and you take those out.
But they're not bouncing. They're not bouncing.
But if they're not bouncing, and then they're just shifting the email out and giving it away. So you're telling me that an ISP will take a live address and give it to someone else as a live address without shutting that email address down first?
They'll take it over and make it a spam trap.
Yeah,
By the way,
how many times have people had their entire program wiped out by a spam trap? I've been doing this for 6 years. It's never happened.
Wow.
Because
it happens.
We have clients
because
happening
you know what?
all the time.
Because that's bad IP management.
Can I point
No,
out?
it's not.
Well, but isn't
I
it
don't
also
know how
bad?
that's bad IP management.
Is it bad list hygiene management? You know, there's
Yes.
tools
Yes.
out there
This
that
is
will let
unusual.
you check against list of known spam traps.
Can I say, here's the thing.
Speak.
The whole inactive debate, right, boils down to one thing. All the people who think that there's some reason to take inactives, there's only one place left for them to hide. They go and find the deliverability folks and cower behind them. It's pathetic. If it's the only reason. I mean, the cost of sending an email to an individual is so close to zero, it is zero. And even if you've got millions of zeros is pretty much zero in the context of what you get. The question is, and we should not confuse bad data with inactive, right? Bad data is bad data.
Yep.
Take it off, right? But if you are an Expedia, or if you work for a good brand, and I do this as a joke. Anyone here work for a crap brand? Right? Anyone here have customers who hate them and just came on the list so that they could hate them even more when the email came into their inbox? Right? So that's the kind of thing. If you are a transactional or a good brand, everyone on your list should have got there the right way, which is they actually actively signed up for you or didn't opt out on a transaction, right? They transacted with you. So therefore, the email address you have is typically the primary email address associated with their credit card, right? Are you telling me that you allow your main email address to go inactive after 180 days? You don't. So the question isn't, what about those inactive addresses or those crap addresses or the thousands you sign up to for programs you don't like? The question is, how do you get people to sign up with their real email address? The one that doesn't change, or if it does change, they tell you it changed because they want to get it. And we present this stuff as problems when actually they're solutions. The solution is make sure everyone on your list was cleanly got, opted in, and they want your brand, okay? If you are in that place, that hypothetical honey trap nonsense will not happen to you. I'll breathe.
Well,
And here-
thank you for that,
and here-
Della.
And here's how it ties back to attribution.
Yeah.
To bring it back to what we were talking about.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you,
was going to
Bob.
ask that question.
When we do stuff like that, we give away margin.
Yeah.
And really that's what we're fighting for, is the appropriate seat at the table. So if you're actively cutting the knees out from your own program, you're giving away attribution. Regardless of the technical infrastructure of attribution, you're giving it away. Because you're putting yourself in the position of knowing what the consumer is going to do before they actually do it. You know the answer before the question's even designed. It's a bad place to be in.
Morgan, how are we doing on time?
You get another couple minutes.
We're good? So, let me switch base and just ask something that came up or track here with, try and get back on track maybe. Ask Jose a question here that came up this morning that we were talking about. You were talking about how frequency can actually play against you when you're doing email marketing as far as attribution goes, because if you're talking especially about driving traffic to a brick and mortar, you actually sort of, flatten out that curve with frequency.
Well, there are two parts. There are two parts to that. So I think everybody presumes attribution is positive. I challenge that notion, that you can do bad things to people with email. Not bad in like bad, but you can actually decrease engagement and stuff like that, because when you start to mail available to them, and so they look at things through that lens. But when you and then also the other part about frequency is that today, email programs, especially around retailers and things like that, are so frequent. 5 years ago, you might do one a week or something like that, and you could actually see, if you start to overlay store sales and stuff like that, you could see the effect, offline channels and that sort of stuff. Today, I think that frequency of large email campaigns is so frequent that you can't see some of this stuff without really digging into it. At a real analytics level, which a lot of people, frankly, don't have access to, and that's unfair.
And that's a really good point, but that makes me think, too, of one of my favorite brand examples of high frequency, the Horchow Neiman Marcus, daily emails, often multiple times a day. But what they've done that's really smart is have gotten very specific. So the offers are so specific, or they're so either merchandise specific or time specific or both, that yes, if it's 20% off furniture, they can see the spike in furniture.
What's it?
The next day or week, it's 20% off rugs and curtains.
568 contacts per year per customer, I think, is the data that I saw for
At least.
Neiman Marcus.
Well,
Yeah.
500. How many people
More than
are
one
doing
a day.
500 contacts a year to your customers?
Can we get a show of hands? Anybody in that range?
How many are doing one contact a day to your customers?
You see, and we
There's
talk
a,
about
there's a
open
lot of
melee.
headroom. There's a
We're
lot
not.
of headroom.
well, it's funny though. There are retailers out there that will send one a day, two a day sometimes, and then their year-over-year comparisons get a little funky, and they go, oh shit, what are we going to do? And what can we do today?
Again, I blame the ESPs.
But guys, I mean, this is another thing that always puzzles me. When you start talking about frequency, and you actually explicitly stated it, so it's not meant at you. Lots of people do the same thing, right? As soon as you start talking about increasing your frequency, they say, oh yeah, when you start, they're very highly engaged, and then you start sending them too much crap, and then they get unengaged. The secret is don't send crap, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
don't send crap. And if you don't send crap, you can find a way of increasing frequency. So the key, that's what it is whether you're on any channel, right? TV, radio, blah, blah, blah. If you want to increase frequency, you actually have to work harder. And you have to work harder on your offer, you have to think it through better, you have to make your creative better.
You have to work harder on your messaging strategy,
absolutely, and you're
overall
paying
messaging
for it
strategy.
because the more emails generates more money. So
Absolutely.
it becomes a virtuous
gets more
circle.
attribution.
And you get more attribution. And so
Because
but,
the frequency will dilute the actual effectiveness of the campaign if you don't work that much harder to make it effective.
people are confusing percentages with numbers, right?
Yes.
Yes, if you increase your frequency, the percentage open rate goes down, but the number visiting your site will go up, right? And the only thing actually that stays static, funnily enough, is the unsubscribe rate. Unsubscribe rates are really hard to increase, believe you me. But what happens is the number of unsubscribes go up, so churn goes up because you're mailing more, but it's really hard to move the needle on unsubscribe. I don't know why.
See, I would
Or spam complaints.
See, I would rather have 1 million people at 10% efficiency than 100,000 people at 100% efficiency. Because at the end of the day, we're not judged by efficiency. We're judged by how much money we generate.
Absolutely.
And what's our place at the table. So if I have to increase the frequency to get to where I need to go without killing myself, I'm going to do it. It's not that big a deal. And really, you know, I like to poke fun at the ESPs and all that stuff. I don't think anybody's trying to do a bad job. I don't think that deliverability people are trying to do a bad job. No one's trying to do a bad job.
Thanks for that.
But I think that we limit ourselves sometimes by artificially constraining ourselves around these ideals that we just don't test into. And so when I hear about a retailer mailing 500 times a year, I'm like, awesome. That just shows the top end of what we can do.
And they are working harder and smarter at it by getting really offer specific, by having, you know, real time specific offers, by doing some of the things on Morgan's slide, you know, about all the excuses and reasons to increase frequency and, you know, bounce back offers and transactional mixed in. That's what you got to think through, and it takes some time.
It takes a lot of effort, and so what we've done over the last few years is really help our clients actually make the cases around making more money, sending less, redistributing some of the spend to things where they can build out the rest of the ecosystem. Because sometimes they have a tough time doing it, and they're also spending, I see all these email teams spending time just churning out emails, churning out emails, churning out emails. They can't look up. And then, they, you know, Della, you say, make your offers better. Well, if you're in a large company and you have 9 different business units and they're all saying, mine, 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 do this now, it's a little bit...
Yeah, but we're the biggest wusses in the process, right?
Well,
they get
I'm just
more
trying
mine than us. So I'm not... We use words. We're great at using words that make us look pathetic. Churn, blast, right? We love that shit, okay? How about doing a great job? If you are a road sweeper, you think your life isn't full of churn. Of course, it's your job to do it every single day. And so the issue is resource. If you ask any marketer what's their number one problem, resource is, anyone here, is resource your number one problem? Any, hands up, marketers? Okay. Technology. How many people think that their biggest problem is the fact that they've got the wrong ESP? Apart from Bob.
Look out, here comes another one.
So the point I'm trying to make is the resource issue. You provide resource, we provide resource, ESPs provide resource. That's actually what marketers need more than anything else. So rather than saying we've got these poor little marketers like hamsters on a wheel running round and round sending out crap, right? They're doing their job. And the bottom line is, if we were to allow them, going back to attribution, if we would suddenly begin to truly attribute the value of what that running around hamster wheel everyday job life is, they would get more money, which means they would have more resource, which means they would hire people who will do all the clever stuff. And that might be you or me or Karen. It could be any one of us, but it could also be more headcount for themselves. And that's the biggest problem.
It is.
And that's why we need attribution, because we'll then get more resource, we'll be more powerful, our team will be bigger than the search team, right? Those guys grow like weeds.
And a lot of, you know, tons of my clients face this. They feel like they're at the beck and call of the rest of the organization. They're the yes men in marketing. Oh, I need another email, I need another email. When they finally develop the messaging strategy, when they finally really sit down with like an editorial calendar style planning tool and map it out and lay in the transactional, they're empowered.
Life gets
I had a
better.
client say this to me last week, like, oh my gosh, for the first time, when so-and-so from sales came, I could actually say, we don't have a spot for that.
Yeah.
I could actually, and bringing it back to attribution, then when they know what they're mailing, they can measure it, because otherwise all this ad hoc stuff coming in, yeah, it's no wonder if you're not seeing results when you can't specifically measure because you're not specifically orchestrating and intentionally planning what you want to do.
Do you know of any good tools out there besides sort of custom consulting arrangements that will mathematically help you determine what your attribution should be?
Tools, no. I mean, there's no off-the-shelf package that you could go and buy that would change your life at the moment. And I don't think the challenge for the reporting that you get within your platform, your ESP platform, is it tends to be based around the campaign, right? So for an obscure reason, we talk about people, but almost every ESP gives you a report that says that message got this open rate and that click rate. They're not based around people or groups of individuals. So the way around it, and what we do, and again, is this resource is throw people at the problem. So we export all the data out of the ESP, break it up, turn it into pink slime, and then reform it into people. and so that's what we do. And then you get a very meaningful understanding of what goes on. So what we have learned from an attribution perspective, and by the way, we can bring almost anything back to attribution. You can try with a question later on. But from an attribution perspective, what we have found drives revenue the most, the thing that if you work on moving that needle automatically moves revenue up, believe it or not, is not the most engaged people. It's actually the number of people who open one email, right? In a year, if you can increase the number of people who open one email in the whole year, your revenue will go up by that percentage or more. It's actually uncanny, and you only begin to see that stuff when you start looking at what the people are doing rather than the campaigns. And I think we lose a lot of what we do with our obsession with the rate of the campaign, et cetera, et cetera. And this isn't a plug, we've developed in-house tools that make that work easier, but it has to be customized for every single client, simply because everyone does things in a different way. And they're bringing in data in different ways and all of that kind of stuff, and it's very, very difficult to automate. If we could have done it, we'd have done it by now, and are still working towards it. But there isn't anything available, and if anyone brought it, as you said earlier on, you'd clean up.
But isn't it also, aren't there, like, we're talking about tools, but aren't there also tactics like e-coupons and so forth, Karen, and I'll throw this out to the whole panel, that you can employ, that are not, that are more cost effective, that you can employ to actually show that email is driving people towards, say, a sale at a brick and mortar at, retail or something?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, there's always offer tracking codes, coupon codes, barcoded coupon that the email links to, or it's in the email, and that's, in an e-commerce situation, of course, that's a given, that's ideal. But, again, what about all of these where email is not going to generate a direct sale itself, but it's contributing?
I think
it's influencing.
that's a good us discussion. That's the kind of stuff that we get all hot and bothered about. But at the C-suite level, they don't give a shit about that. They want to know how's the channel moving sort of directionally and organically. And so those higher level engagement numbers, if any smart technology people out there who want to figure out a way to get a $50 million business off the ground, figure out this problem and come back to us next year and say, here's how we've solved it. Because it's really a huge problem for all of us is what's the appropriateness of your channel outside of direct measurement.
So
Jose,
just
did you
a
have
quick,
something?
I was going to just say a quick question. So have any of you worked with Clear Sailing or familiar with them? Okay. So,
Jose?
yeah, so Jose, if you have the... Well, actually, no, I've looked over, I think, isn't Clear Sailing here? I think, I thought they were. But
No, I don't think so.
I've looked over the shoulders of some of my clients on the attribution. And frankly, they haven't really pulled it into email yet, which is interesting, but that's what they're looking at. I mean, you see it, I'll tell you, it's sexy. It is sexy. It's got all these bar charts and colors and suite and cross-reference stuff. It's awesome looking.
Email often gets left out. It's kind of most studies about that, they'll talk about every other channel, and then email is invisible, and that's a challenge.
Well, part of that, so one of those things is the tagging that's prevalent everywhere, right? And some of the limitations. Although I think many companies are getting around those limitations now with tagging and email. But one of the things you just need to be careful on all of these things. So getting something that makes your case is a good thing, right? But now we have, at Axiom, we have a new chief product officer. He's the guy that did Google Analytics, and I saw him at AdTech last year. And he made me roll because he was talking about first click, last click, and MCU models. I don't know if anybody saw this stuff. Anyway, you're like, what's an MCU model? And then after half an hour, he goes, made crap up, right? So the point is, I mean, you just got to know the methodology and be comfortable with it. So, because some of the things, it depends on, I think, what you're trying to either justify or show. Because if you have a decision around allocation of budget, that's one thing, versus defending a channel, it's another. Yeah.
Because it all comes down to budget. If your budget's set appropriately, you don't really care about attribution.
Yeah.
But it's when you get to the margins and they say, well, we want $80 million out of your channel rather than $65 million out of your channel, go get it, then attribution becomes a big deal. But appropriately setting your budget in the first place is the first thing, the first challenge for attribution.
And the other thing that I would just say, I mean, I don't want to get into a discussion about inactives, but there are ways that you can use your inactives in other channels. So you have all these lists that have grown over years, some larger than others, and you either don't mail to them or they've opted out, all this sort of stuff. There are tactics around being able to use those in addressable media, online with display. And if you can control that, you can actually show greater value of your lists, right?
We were talking about the fear that email marketers have to sort of assert themselves in these situations. But it's interesting to me because I don't think that email marketers were created out of mud by God or anything. I mean, it's like Mark Brownlow said. He said, we're not email marketers, we're marketers who use email. So we're all coming from that same sort of, that same group. Why is it? Is it a case of we're not just assertive enough, or is it more a case of we don't understand the data or the tools, or we just don't have the tools available to us?
Fear and self-loathing. Fear and self-loathing.
But
Because
why?
we're afraid of being called spammers, right? So we do everything we can to not be called a spammer, which includes stupid stuff like not doing what works. I mean, we're on the round table about list building, right? The most successful tactic by a country mile is popovers and pop-unders. Everybody who's done it says it works. And you know what the comment is? But we feel a bit icky doing it, right? Fear and self-loathing. If we could get over the fact that if we could accept we're not spammers, right? And hit anyone who calls us a spammer at dinner, or be proud of being spammers because spammers are actually overtly successful, then we wouldn't have that problem.
I think it's a little bit different, and it's changed over the years. 10 years ago, it was the siloed problem, that the email people were literally working out of the closet, no connection to the rest of the marketing organization. I mean, the tales I remember hearing were just legendary. And even multiple email operations siloed from one another. So that's evolved. But there's still that, we're almost like the forgotten stepchild as a result of that, and being such a small percentage of budget and revenue compared to, and not as sexy as social media or search or...
Says who?
Well, that and
Yeah.
Well,
Email's
says
sexy.
a lot of the research reports out there and so
No,
forth.
it gets my rocks off.
email is very interesting in that email combines two forms into one. It combines art and it combines technology.
Art and science.
And email marketers seem to be comfortable with one or the other. It's like either they're into the creative and they outsource all that icky technology stuff, or they're such technologists that they figure, well, any old creative will do. And you really have to be able to span both. And this argument about attribution really does span both, because you can't just solve it through technology, you can't just solve it through art, you have to solve it through a combination of the two.
Absolutely. Morgan, are we short on time?
I think that was an excellent summary of the attribution debate. So thank you, Bob. But yeah, we do want to wrap up. If we might have time for one additional question from the field.
Do we have a question?
I have a quick question.
Okay, a quick question.
Yeah, it's really quick. So I haven't found, and I'm curious if anybody else has, that any of the Tagmans of the world and all of those people who purport to give you the online attribution tools are scalable enough for anybody who's a major marketer. Has anyone else? Because, they're offering a solution in a box for attribution, but it's like, yeah, but, I got one server over in the closet over here. So I'm just curious if anybody has had success with any of those.
Show of hands, perhaps?
That was an easy question.
Easy answer.
There you go. All right. Well, hey, I want to say thank you to all of our panelists. So let's give them a round of applause.